Thank you to our Ko-fi supporters for helping us make this video, like this guy. Today, we're going over a battle so epic that it's still being studied by military tacticians and historians over 2,000 years later. It's March 241 BCE, and a Carthaginian general stationed on the island of Sicily named Hamilcar Barca is planning his next attack. Carthage had been at war with the Roman Republic for 23 long years, and though the Romans have suffered incredible losses, for some reason they've stubbornly refused to give up. And now, Carthage is on the brink of bankruptcy. They're rapidly losing the war, and Hamilcar knows it, but he personally has never lost a battle, and he's determined to drive the Romans off this land or die trying. But out of the blue, he receives orders to stop fighting. The Carthaginian navy, once the most powerful navy in the world, had just been completely obliterated by the Romans. This loss sealed the deal for the politicians back home, and they want out. We're not fighters, we're stone cold capitalists.
Obviously.
So they order Hamilcar to handle the terms of their surrender. Just give the Romans whatever they want and just get it over with. Hamilcar is enraged by the news, and he refuses to meet with the Romans. All those years he'd spent fighting, the lives of his men who had fallen in battle, was it really all for nothing? He sends one of his commanders to sign the treaty, and the terms of the deal that comes back are humiliating. The Romans' goals are very clear. They want to cripple Carthage so badly it can never rise up again. They demand 3,200 silver talents, the island of Sicily, and Carthage has to pinky swear to never ever declare war on Rome again. The deal is signed, and the First Punic War officially comes to a close. But Hamilcar, as hard as he tries, cannot move on. The deal with the Romans was humiliating, and to add insult to injury, they quickly stole the islands of Sardinia and Corsica when Carthage can't defend them. Every transgression committed by the Romans feels like a personal attack on the proud Carthaginian general, and he becomes completely obsessed with the idea of revenge. If the cowards in the Senate do not have the guts to fight back, then he will personally defend the honor of Carthage and bring Rome to its knees. He walks with his 9-year-old son Hannibal to a temple of their god, Baal-Hamon, and forces him to swear a blood oath that he will never, ever be a friend to Rome. They then travel to Spain and begin to conquer the southern part of the peninsula. Hamilcar quickly captures silver mines to help pay off Carthage's war debt, and then he sets out to recruit a new army. When the local tribes resist recruitment and begin to fight back, he brings his son Hannibal into battle to give him first-hand experience, and at night, he and his generals train the boy in military tactics and strategy. In Hamilcar's mind, Hannibal will one day become Carthage's greatest warrior, and he will lead an army when it's finally time to seek revenge against the Romans. Everything is going exactly as planned, but before he can launch a new war on Rome, Hamilcar is attacked by Spanish tribesmen, and while fighting back, he drowns in a river. The new Carthaginian army is given to his son-in-law Hasdrubal, but the pride of Hamilcar, the young Hannibal Barca, continues to grow, and he becomes everything his father had hoped for: a master tactician, a brave warrior, and a charismatic leader. Over the next 8 years, Hannibal would earn the complete loyalty of his father's army, and when Hasdrubal is assassinated in 221 BCE, the soldiers of Carthage unanimously vote for Hannibal to lead them. Forged by over a decade of battlefield experience, Hannibal has been molded into the living embodiment of vengeance. And finally, the time has come for his father's long-awaited dream to become reality. In 219 BCE, Hannibal takes his army and sieges the Roman-allied city of Saguntum. The Romans send an ambassador to Carthage to demand that Hannibal be turned over for his crimes. The Senate chamber boils with contempt upon seeing the Roman enter the room. He steps forward and declares, "I bring with me war and peace. Take which you please." "Whichever you prefer." "Yeah. Then I choose war." And upon hearing these words, the resentment of 23 years of Roman arrogance can no longer be held back. The senators stand and shout back, "We accept it!" The ambassador turns and leaves, having no idea that he had just unleashed the greatest enemy Rome will ever face in its 2,000-year history. A man so terrifying that just the whisper of his name would strike fear into the hearts of future generations of Romans for centuries to come. The Romans wasted no time sending out 2 armies to take on the Carthaginians, one led by the consul Scipio heading to Spain to deal with Hannibal, and the other under the consul Longus to Africa to go straight for Carthage. And I'm actually going to pause here to point something out that will be very important in this story. See, at the time, Rome was still a republic and was governed by a senate and 2 elected consuls who served 1-year terms. In addition to running the government, these consuls were also the commanders of the Roman military, so every army Hannibal fights in this story was essentially led by one of the 2 presidents of Rome. Can you imagine any of our recent presidents personally leading an army into battle? Anyways, Scipio lands in southern Gaul, ready to confront Hannibal, but he's shocked to find out that the Carthaginian army has already left Spain. He manages to engage part of Hannibal's cavalry near the Rhone River, but the rest of his army had moved on and was quickly marching east. Scipio hightails it back to Italy, just in case Hannibal tries to do something incredibly stupid, like trying to cross the Alps or something. I mean, it's already fall. He wouldn't be crazy enough to try to cross the Alps now. Ha! Hannibal had decided to cross the Alps. The journey takes months, and it is brutal. War elephants, pack animals, his men, they're all dying daily. But somehow, he miraculously makes it to the other side. By then, he had lost half of his army to the elements, but Hannibal had a backup plan. See, he knows the Celts in northern Italy also hate the Romans. So as soon as they see him, they'll all come rushing to join his cause in no time. Hey you're a Celt. Don't you just hate the Romans? Join me and we'll crush them together. F*** off, pal. As I was saying, don't you just hate the Romans? Join me and we'll crush them together. Okay. With some of the Celtic tribes finally coming around and joining his army, Hannibal begins his invasion of Rome. Scipio's fears are proven right, and he takes control of a new army in Italy and quickly marches his men out to confront their enemy. The 2 armies find each other near the river Tichinus, and they quickly set up camp to prepare for battle. Both the Romans and the Carthaginians feel the weight of what's to come. For the first time in 23 years, the 2 greatest powers of the era will once again meet in battle. And this will happen when 2 small scouting parties cross paths in late November of 218 BCE. On this day, both Hannibal and Scipio had decided to lead their scouting parties personally, and they quickly spot each other while on patrol. The 2 generals turn their men towards their enemy and begin to size each other up. As Hannibal looks out at the Roman scouting party, he realizes that his cavalry vastly outnumbers his opponents. He quickly orders a full charge, and the Second Punic War is officially on. The Roman foot soldiers attempt to throw their javelins at the incoming enemy, but even before they can get their first volley into the air, Hannibal and his cavalry are crashing into them. The Romans are no match for Hannibal's elite Numidian horse riders, and they quickly begin to run away. In the battle, the consul, Scipio, is badly wounded and thrown from his horse. His 16-year-old son, Scipio the Younger, who is positioned in the rear guard, sees his father collapse on the ground, and on instinct, he charges through the ranks of fleeing Roman soldiers, desperately cutting his way through the enemy. He makes it to his injured father, grabs him, throws him on his horse, and rides back to camp, saving his life. The Battle of Tichinus, though seemingly an insignificant skirmish, has a huge impact on the morale of everyone involved. Hannibal's men were now confident they could beat the Romans, and the Romans were stunned by just how good the Africans were at fighting. But no one is moved more than the Celts, who now realize that Hannibal may actually be the one who could free them from Roman oppression. As word spreads through the local tribes, more and more Celtic warriors begin bringing Hannibal the heads of decapitated Roman soldiers as offerings to join his army. Now, when Scipio had realized that Hannibal might try to cross the Alps, he had sent word to the other Roman consul Longus to abandon the plan to invade Africa and to return to Italy immediately. Longus and his men finally make it to Scipio's camp, and he is shocked to find his co-consul gravely injured. Scipio warns him that this Hannibal guy is no joke, and with winter quickly approaching, they should pull back and resume aggressions in the spring. But here's the thing. Remember how the consuls served 1-year terms? Well, Longus and Scipio were about to term out, and for Longus, this was really bad. He still hadn't defeated Hannibal and become the hero of Rome like he said he would, and now time was running out. If he followed Scipio's advice, it would be the next guy who would get all the glory, and the thought of this made Longus sick to his stomach. So he decides to ignore Scipio's warning, and he marches out to beat Hannibal now. Longus folds Scipio's army into his own and heads out in search of Hannibal, whom he finds camped out near the river Trebia. On patrol, Hannibal sees the Romans setting up camp. They look pretty aggro, so he begins scouting the area, searching for the perfect battlefield. In his search, he discovers a dried, overgrown riverbed, and upon seeing this, he smiles. He rides back to camp and instructs his men on the game plan. Longus has no idea what's coming, and he's about to learn firsthand that there are levels to this game. It's a cold, dark December morning. The winter winds are howling, and sleet is falling from the sky. The conditions are perfect for Hannibal's plan, and he sends his light cavalry across the river before dawn to attack the Roman camp. Startled, Longus quickly wakes his men and orders his cavalry to engage. The consul rushes to ready the rest of his army, and he personally leads them out to fight. Hannibal's horse riders retreat over to their side of the river, and Longus, bleary-eyed but pumped full of adrenaline, leads his entire army across the freezing river in pursuit and begins to line them up into formation on the other side. Now, the combined Roman army that Longus had that day numbered around 40,000 troops, and it stretched 2 miles long, so getting everyone into position took hours. The soldiers stood there soaking wet, waiting for orders as howling winds froze their clothing to their skin. The Roman cavalry, who were still chasing Hannibal's Numidian riders, finally give up. Exhausted, they take their positions on the flanks of the Roman formation. The battle had not even begun, but the Romans were already in bad shape. The Carthaginians finally make their appearance. Well-rested, fed, and covered in oil to protect them from the cold, Hannibal's men begin to line up on the battlefield. He places his new Celtic allies in the center of his formation, lining them up directly across from the most experienced Roman infantry. He flanks the Celts with his experienced Spanish and African infantry, and on both sides of the army, he positions his last remaining war elephants and his cavalry. Longus looks out and sees that his army appears to be much larger, and he smiles. "All right, boys, we've got them right where we want them." So cold. The time for glorious victory has come, and Longus orders a charge. The exhausted Roman cavalry ride out and are quickly owned by Hannibal's war elephants and cavalry. The consul bravely leads the infantry from the front lines, and together they smash into the Celts. The fighting is intense, and to the Romans' credit, despite being tired, cold, and hungry, they begin to overwhelm the center of Hannibal's formation. Hannibal's cavalry, having quickly routed the Roman cavalry, turn around and come to Hannibal's aid. They attack into the sides of the Roman formation, but Longus and his heavy infantry push the Celts further and further back. Though they're slowly being surrounded, the Romans are still confident they're winning.
All right, boys. We got them right where we want. Oh, fuck.
Suddenly, the war cries of 2,000 elite Carthaginian troops are heard behind the Roman formation. Led personally by Hannibal's brother Mago, they emerge like monsters hiding in the shadows and charge into the Roman rearguard. Hannibal had placed his most elite troops in the dried riverbed the previous night, and this sneak attack now has the Roman army completely surrounded. With no other option, Longus calls for his men to fight like their lives depend on it, and they push harder and harder into the enemies in front of them. And this is where the story gets weird. Despite their condition, Longus and his men managed to break through the Celtic line, but instead of circling back and surrounding the Carthaginian forces, they continue to charge forward and eventually rush right off the battlefield. No one knows if Longus really thought he had won or if he was just trying to run away at this point, but he and his men charge all the way to a nearby town and never come back. The remaining Romans are quickly destroyed, with casualties numbering around 20,000 men. Hannibal's losses are quickly replaced by more Celts signing up to fight with him when news of the victory spreads across the land. Longus and the infantry who ran with him slink their way back to their camp, and he immediately makes a beeline back to Rome to give his side of the story that he actually won. Scipio and Longus term out, and Rome elects 2 new consuls, and one is this guy named Flaminius. Now, Flaminius was known for a couple of things. One, like Longus, he was someone who deeply desired fame and glory. And 2, so far he'd gotten that fame and glory by killing and terrorizing the Celts in northern Italy, the very same Celts who were now swarming to join Hannibal's army. Hope that doesn't come back to bite him in the ass later in this story. What? The 2 new consuls placed their armies on the only 2 roads leading into southern Italy. If Hannibal wished to attack Rome, he would inevitably have to cross paths with one of them. Because, I mean, nobody would be crazy enough to try to cross that nasty-ass swamp. Oh my god, is that his eye? After crossing a nasty swamp, Hannibal arrives in an area called Etruria and begins terrorizing Roman towns. Flaminius is the closer of the two consuls, so he rushes with his army into the area to find Hannibal. He spots him camping near a lake called Trasimene and quickly sets up camp on the other side. Hannibal sees that Flaminius is really itching for a fight, so in the middle of the night, he sneaks almost his entire army up a hill that overlooks both the road to his camp and the lake. He then positions a small infantry force blocking the road and waits quietly in the shadows. As expected, the next morning, Flaminius marches his army out to attack Hannibal's camp. A thick fog has risen from the lake, and the Romans struggle to see the road in front of them. They stumble forward blindly along the narrow path, completely unaware that Hannibal and his army watch them like predators tracking their prey. The Romans continue to march forward when suddenly, emerging from the mist ahead, they spot a small formation of enemy infantry. Flaminius eagerly gives the signal to attack, and the front of the Roman line rushes in to engage their enemy. The soldiers at the rear of the Roman line can hear the sounds of battle, but the fog is so dense they have no idea what's going on. Confusion spreads through the ranks when suddenly the ground begins to shake beneath their feet. The Romans desperately look around, trying to see through the dense fog as the sound of galloping horses and battle cries grows nearer and nearer. Hannibal's men pounce, and the Romans, blinded by the mist, are completely caught off guard. They quickly find themselves fighting for their lives, trapped on a narrow road and pinned against the lake behind them. They frantically look for an escape, but they're surrounded, and to their horror, they are massively outnumbered. Hannibal's new Celtic allies have grown his numbers to nearly 50,000 men. Flaminius tries to maintain order, shouting commands to his now panicked soldiers, and his voice catches the attention of the Celts. They look to the Roman giving orders and recognize him instantly. They know his name. They know his face. He's the monster who had burned their homes, killed their sons, and stolen their daughters. And now, he's standing right there in front of them.
All right, boys. We got him right where we want.
The now leaderless Romans try to fight back, but many of the soldiers are pushed into the lake. Some try to swim away, only to be dragged underwater by their heavy armor. Some wade out until the water reaches their chins. There, they helplessly wait for the Carthaginian cavalry to ride out and behead them. In just a few hours, the entire lake is dyed a deep blood red. The results of the battle at Trasimene are horrific for the Romans. The consul Flaminius is dead, and nearly 30,000 of the men were either killed or captured in what historians call the largest ambush in the history of battle. But the Roman casualties at Lake Trasimene would pale in comparison to what was to come. See, if war was art, this next battle would be Hannibal's masterpiece, and it would cement his place as one of the greatest generals of all time. The news of the defeat at Lake Trasimene shook Rome. Hannibal had become an existential threat to their existence, and so in 217 BCE, the Romans did something they had not done in over 140 years. They put a temporary pause to the two-consul system and elected a senator to the position of dictator. The man chosen for the job was named Fabius Maximus, and he was given complete control of the government and military. He would be allowed to use everything Rome had to offer to solve the Hannibal problem. But the plan Fabius came up with was something the Romans could never have imagined in a million years. Fabius' strategy was to follow Hannibal's army but never fight him head-on. Instead, he would attack Hannibal's men when they were foraging for food, or when Hannibal was preoccupied with something else. As soon as Hannibal would show up, he would run away. If Hannibal's army had a life bar, Fabius was content to slowly chip it down with fireballs from a distance. Now, this strategy was actually brilliant and would later be named the Fabian strategy after Fabius, and it would be used by General George Washington to win the American Revolutionary War. But at the time, the Romans absolutely hated it. They felt it made them look like a bunch of cowards, and to the Romans, there was nothing worse than a coward. Fabius would be given the nickname the Delayer, but as much as everyone hated it, his plan worked. Hannibal's men grew exhausted from the constant harassment, and with the bought time, Rome was able to rebuild its army. Hannibal tried his best to provoke Fabius into combat, but he never took the bait, and when he stepped down as dictator in late 217 BCE, Rome's military was stronger than ever. 2 new consuls are elected, a man named Paulus and a man named Varro. By then, the Romans had stomached the Fabian strategy for as long as they possibly could, and now they once again were itching for a fight. And so, Rome fielded the largest army they had ever put together to crush the Carthaginians once and for all. 86,000 men, an army so large that everyone was convinced that even the mighty Hannibal would be no match for their sheer numbers. In fact, the Romans are so confident that many senators, including some previous consuls, rush to join this campaign. They all want to be there in person for the fall of the monster from Africa. Paulus and Varro march this giant army out to find Hannibal, and they find him camped near a supply depot called Cannae. When Hannibal sees the Roman army in the distance, he is shocked by its size, but he realizes that maybe this is exactly the opportunity he'd been waiting for. A victory over a force this large would no doubt convince the rest of Italy to join him against Rome. So he begins to cook up a plan so legendary it would be studied by historians for thousands of years to come. Through his scouts, Hannibal learns that the consul Varro is hot-headed and very eager to fight. The 2 consuls are taking turns leading the army on alternating days, so Hannibal plans to fight on a day Varro is in charge. He thinks he can use Varro's confidence against him, and this day finally comes on August 2nd, 216 BCE. Varro's tired of waiting and instructs the massive Roman army to be lined up on a flat plain to the left of the Aufidus River. He forms a massive column of heavy infantry and positions them in the center of his formation. Like a sledgehammer, he'll smash through Hannibal's center and destroy them from the inside out. Varro and Paulus then take their positions commanding the cavalry on the flanks. Hannibal surveys the Roman army and positions his men to counter Varro's formation. He places his loyal African infantry, who he had dressed in the armor of dead Roman soldiers they defeated in the past battles. He places his cavalry opposite of the Romans' horse riders, and finally in the center, he places a thin line of his weakest troops, the Celts and Iberians. Instead of lining them up in a straight line, he positions his troops in a way where the center of his line forms a rounded bulge towards the Romans. Hannibal and his brother Mago take their place directly in the middle of the infantry, signaling to the men that they are confident they'll win. Together, they stare out at the wall of Roman soldiers and steel themselves for what's to come. Varro gives the signal, and the Roman column smashes into the center of the Celtic line, quickly pushing Hannibal's outie formation into an innie. Both generals give the signal and the cavalry clash. Like every encounter before, Hannibal's elite horse riders quickly body the Romans. Paulus's wing is the first to rout, and he's knocked off his horse and injured. Without his horse, he scrambles his way into the middle column and helps to command troops there. With Paulus's men defeated, the now free Carthaginian cavalry sweep around to the other side of the battlefield and attack Varro and his riders. The consul realizes he's outmatched and retreats with his men off the battlefield. Though Hannibal's cavalry have made quick work of their Roman opponents, Varro's thick infantry column is quickly pushing deeper and deeper into the Celtic line. Sensing that victory may be within their grasp, the Romans increase their pressure and pound into Hannibal's ranks with increased ferocity. The Celts are dropping like flies, and their line is now about to give way. But little did anyone know, this was all part of Hannibal's plan. As the Romans push deeper into Hannibal's ranks, they seem to completely ignore the Carthaginian heavy infantry standing on both sides of the battle. Maybe it was because Hannibal's men were dressed in Roman armor, or maybe it's because they were blinded by the dust blowing into their eyes that day, or maybe they were so confident they were about to break through at any second that they thought it didn't matter. Whatever the reason, it was now too late. Hannibal shouts his orders, and his elite African infantry turn inwards and attack. They push the already cramped Roman formation closer and closer together, and soon the Romans are so tightly packed that their arms are pinned to their sides, and they can no longer swing their swords. At the same time, Hannibal's cavalry swoops in from behind and seal off the Romans' rear. Hannibal had activated his trap card, and now 80,000 Roman soldiers are completely surrounded. Hannibal had pulled off the impossible. He had encircled an army twice the size of his own. And now for the Romans, there was no escape. The Roman infantry's forward momentum slows to a halt, and panic begins to sweep through their ranks. Thoughts of Trebia and Trasimene fill their minds as Hannibal's forces continue to pack them closer and closer together. The Roman cavalry, who were also trapped, recognize their fate. They begin dismounting their horses and draw their swords, now planning to sell their lives for the highest price possible. Hannibal gives the signal, and the slaughter begins. Historians estimate around 100 Romans died every minute at Cannae, and by the end of the day, over 30,000 gallons of blood had been spilled in this circle of death. At nightfall, the lifeless bodies of 70,000 Romans are left in a pile as Hannibal and his exhausted army march back to camp. 20% of Rome's military-aged men were wiped out in a single day. Amongst the dead lay the former consul Paulus and many other senators who would all wish to witness the fall of Hannibal in person. Less than 10,000 of the 86,000 Roman soldiers present at the Battle of Cannae escaped, and in any other timeline, this would have been the end of the Roman Republic. But in our timeline, a young 17-year-old military tribune was amongst the survivors. His name was Scipio the Younger, the man who had saved his father at the Battle of Ticinus earlier in this story. Though no one knows it at the time, the fate of the Republic will one day rest on his shoulders, and he'll eventually go down in history as one of the greatest figures in Rome's nearly 2,000-year history. He will earn the title Scipio Africanus, the hero of the Romans, when he manages to do the impossible. He will defeat Hannibal Barca in battle.